Welcome in, college football fans, and welcome to the First and Long College Football Show. I'm your co-host, Marcus. There's your other co-host, Mason. We are continuing our countdown to number one, our countdown to kickoff, and we're at number 6. We'll be talking about the Alabama Crimson Tide today. And what we've been doing on this countdown is basically just hitting all of the teams that we feel like have a chance to affect the college football playoff in 2024. And all the teams that intrigue Mason and I, and we feel like you guys as well, the viewer, and we hope that you have enjoyed this countdown. We're at number 6. I think we started at like 35 or something like that. And by the time this video is released, we're going to be just literally within days of college football. And man, I just cannot wait. Mason, how are you today, man? You ready to talk some Bama football? And even more importantly, I know you're ready for the kickoff time, man. It's almost
Yeah,
here, buddy.
absolutely. We're 2 weeks away from college football, y'all. I mean, by the time this video releases, we're 14 days away. I cannot be more fired up. This is going to be a hell of a year. I think it's kind of what you would consider a rebuild year for Alabama. Um, Alabama doesn't really rebuild, right? I think that's the old adage. They just reload. I don't think that that's going to be much different with Kalen Deboer. All this talk about Nick Saban leaving, Kalen Deboer coming in, is the team taking a step back? Are they going to be better in some ways? I think that we're not going to know until the game is played, until the really the whole season is played, and even then, if Alabama ends up with a 9-3 season, well, guess what? He gets another year, right? So I think that we can look at the scope of Kalen DeBoer when it's all said and done. But as of this year, I think it's a sand pit, that he's playing with. He gets to go out and just make something happen. Let's see what he comes up with. And so I think it's going to be really really interesting to see what he puts on the field. Obviously, a ton of talent. Look, this Alabama team has still recruited at a top 3 level for the past 4 years, or 5 years really, with the COVID year. That's what this roster is built of. It's top 3 classes for just about every single one of those years, and so Kalen DeBoer and company is inheriting quite the roster. There's no need to bring in a bunch of transfer players or anything like that. He's got the team there. They did, they picked up some onesie twosies transfer players. Got a couple guys from Washington, which we'll go into. But ultimately, this is the best roster that Kalen DeBoer has ever had. He's a hell of a coach, and I'm really fired up for him and ready to see what he does with this program.
Yeah, and it is kind of a little bit of a change for him in the fact that you're right, Mason. This is the most talented team he's ever had, and this has been a guy that we've kind of looked at over the last few years and thought, wow, talk about a guy that can do more with less. I mean, he took Washington all the way to the national championship last year, and this wasn't Washington wasn't a team that was just slap full of 5 stars, Mason. I mean, don't get me wrong. There was enough talent on that team, specifically on that offense. But with that being said, I mean, he didn't have the best defenders on the field week in and week out, and he made it happen. And I think that that's a lot to do with the scheme that Kalen DeBoer travels with, and this guy has really got it going on, and his scheme will continue to be the scheme as he's taken over at Alabama. Um, we'll learn a little bit more about Kalen DeBoer here. 4 seasons as a FBS head coach. He's been at Fresno State, Washington. Um, he was the OC at Indiana. Worked at Eastern Washington, Southern Illinois, Sioux Falls. I mean, this guy's been around, but just not like the big names other than Washington. Um, this was a good pick out by Alabama. I have all the faith in the world in this guy. Before the season started last year, Mason, I got to bring it up. Uh, this was a guy that I predicted to take his team to the playoff. He did that. He did more than that. He got all the way to the national championship game. But this guy has barely lost any games as a head coach. I mean, he lost one last year, right? We all saw that happen. But I mean, he's lost literally just a handful of games in his whole college coaching career. It's really pretty unbelievable. Um, But Mason, you kind of spoke to the talent that's on this team. You can see the recruiting rankings there by year. Just as you said, Mason, number two, number one, number two, number one, number two, all the way from 2020 to 2024. Doesn't get a whole lot better than that. 2023, 7 5 stars. Just unbelievable. Now, some of those 5 stars are not there. Obviously, with the transfer portal and losing a legendary coach like Nick Saban, you are going to have guys that go elsewhere. I mean, that is to be expected. But I felt like Kalen Deboer did good enough damage control to where there's enough pieces coming out of this roster to really keep this team intact and maybe do more than that. Maybe push for a college football playoff berth yet again this season, or yet again for both parties, Alabama and Kalen Deboer, just in different locations last year. Transfer portal rankings by year: 22, you're number 5; 23, number 52; number 24, number 3. One of those seasons doesn't match with the others, but you took 7 5 stars that year, right? So you felt like you were in pretty good shape, I think. So by all intents and purposes, when Alabama has been tasked with going and finding guys to fill holes, they've done it because they've had not one of the best. They've had the best coach in the country for 17 years straight, and now I think they've continue to have one of the best coaches in the country. I won't say Kalen DeBoer is the best team in the country or coach in the country, but he's definitely on a short list. Record versus rivals since 2020 is something we talk about with each of these teams. Alabama's done what they needed to do against everybody. Georgia's got 1 win against them in the last 4. LSU's got 1 win against them in the last 4, and Tennessee's got 1 win against them in the last 4. So and Auburn doesn't have a win. Should have won last year, but Jalen Milroe absolutely just pulled some magic out of the hat and crushed the hearts of the Auburn Tigers. And I know the Alabama faithful were in love with that. Let's go over to offense, Mason. Look, there's 2 new offensive coordinators, right? But are they really offensive coordinators? Jamarcus Shepard, Nick Sheridan, they're co-offensive coordinators in this system. They follow Coach DeBoer. Coach DeBoer last year had the offensive coordinator that ended up going to the Seattle Seahawks. And why am I forgetting his name?
Ryan Grubbs, yeah.
Grubbs. Grubbs was a guy that Nick Saban was after the year before that, right? Wanted him the year before, and he said, "No, I'm staying in Washington." And lo and behold, he helps Washington run that offense and run it all the way to the national championship. Well, he was originally supposed to come with Coach, and then he ends up at the Seattle Seahawks. So you promote a couple of guys from within, but let's make no mistake about it. I mean, this is DeBoer's system, and he'll be calling plays from the sidelines. He'll be having plenty of influence on this offense. One that was better at the end of the year last year than what it began, right? Alabama's offense at the beginning of last year had left a lot of people puzzled. A lot of people were saying, Nick Saban finally ran out of magic, because, and what I mean by that is not necessarily Nick Saban. When you have to replace coordinators every year or two, I think everybody was kind of thinking, all right, he finally ran out of the next perfect guy to fill that spot, with Tommy Rees. And it started off a little rocky, but by the end of the year, this was an offense that was humming along pretty good. And I think there just needed to be some adjustments made to the personnel on hand. We're going to talk more about that in a second, but 12th in scoring offense is going to do you just fine. 36.2 points per game. Really, what was lacking early on in the year was the passing game, and I felt like Jalen Milroe slowly got better as the year went on. But Mason, the more I watch of him now, the more I'm starting to see the improvements in his mechanics, and he looks like a natural thrower of the ball now. Last year there was some awkward throws, especially intermediate game. He's got a beautiful long ball, always has. There was just some intermediate stuff that was inaccurate. It just looked undone. His form and footwork kind of looked awkward at times. I don't think I'm seeing that anymore. I'm thinking they got a lot of that stuff fixed over this past offseason. But we'll go more into Jalen Milroe here in a second. But and I believe I messed up on that. The 88% returning production at the bottom of this line. I think it's 62%. Um, and I'm sorry about that, folks. I gotta have something I mess up every single show. Mason, what do you think about this offense last year and the journey that this team went on last year? Because I really feel like it was a tale of two teams.
Hey, from now on, we gotta blame the producers. I mean, that's a producer error
Trevor,
right there.
damn
Yeah,
it,
there you
Trevor.
go.
We haven't
Yep.
even hired Trevor yet. We haven't even. We're gonna hire Trevor and we're gonna yell at him.
Yeah. If it's not the Trevor, it's gonna be a Trevor. So we'll
Yeah.
figure it out. We'll get there one day.
Mm-hmm.
Tell 300 of your friends to subscribe, y'all, and we'll hire a Trevor that we can make fun of on the show. Um, yeah. So the 2023 offense was kind of puzzling, probably really frustrating for Alabama fans. And to me, I wanted to see more of Jalen Milroe on those intermediate throws, but it just seemed like it was not clicking for him. So
Yeah.
it was all or nothing, which was really similar to like a Florida State approach of last season, except Florida State had a Johnny Wilson and a Keon Coleman on the ends who were out there running, getting deep balls and whatnot, and Alabama just didn't have that. That this was the first year in a while that we've seen Alabama not have the horses in the stable on the outsides to really get the job done on offense, and it showed, especially because Jalen Milroe is not a prolific passer, or was not last season, and he could not make up for the discrepancies in the wide receiving room. And I think that was kind of the difference in this offense leading the team to a national championship. And what they did do, which was go to the college football playoff, win the SEC, which was amazing. As a Georgia fan, that was a really tough game, tough loss for Georgia, but it was an incredible victory for Alabama considering how they started the season to how they finished. It was really a I don't know that any team, any really competitive team, playoff competitive team, grew as much as Alabama did last year. It was pretty remarkable to see, and now they're going to try to build on that. Another season with a similar group of guys on the offense. You lose a lot at wide receiver, which we'll get into here in a minute, but ultimately it's the same core of folks, and I think that they're going to have the same mission in mind.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, we got to start off with the man. And folks, just to kind of let you know how we do this, we're going to go offense, we're going to go defense, we're going to go by position group, and then we're going to take a look at the 2024 schedule and give you our predictions for the season. And we hope that you'll give us your predictions in the comment section, and let's talk about it. We'd love to hash it out with you. And Alabama's got a really smart fan base. Um, they got a lot of people that know a lot about the program, and we'd love to hear from you guys. There's no better connect or inside source than fans that are just absolutely fanatical about their team. Um, let's talk about the quarterbacks, Mason. Jalen Milroe, we just talked about him a little bit. The season ended a lot better than it started. His touchdown to interception ratio was good. He didn't put the ball in harm's way a ton, but there was certain situations where he did take some sacks. Part of it was the offensive line, but it wasn't all of them. It was some of it was his indecision at times, or a play would break down and he say, "I'm getting out of the pocket," and then get technically sacked, right? Well, even though he was running and it was like a tackle for loss or whatever you want to call it. This team averaged giving up 3.5 sacks per game last year, and that was ranked 125th in the country. So we'll rehash that stat here in just a minute whenever we talk about the offensive line. But at some point, you got to expect your quarterback to grow mentally and grow within a system and be able to say, "This play's no good. I'm living for another down." I think Jalen Milroe could do that a little bit better. As we talked about, the short intermediate stuff was a challenge for him at times last year. Um, this is going to be a new system, though, man, and so I feel like we're still kind of wait and see. And you know, I'm not I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm not predicting this to happen or anything. But you've got a guy like Austin Mack who is waiting in the wings, man, and I'm telling you, this guy's really good. So it's only going to take a few games of Jalen Milroe not being able to get things going, or this offense really struggling, for this coaching staff to make a switch. I mean, it is possible, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but um, because I think Jalen Milroe has probably progressed this year, and we just got to see how this offense fits him, Mason. I don't know. I just don't know yet. If you're asking him to sit back and do what Michael Penix did last year, then I think you're kind of fitting a square peg into a round hole.
Hmm.
But I think Kalen Deboer is way smarter than that. He's playing chess while everybody else is playing checkers. So my thought process is they're going to have a system with terminology like they had last year, but I think it's going to be more run oriented. Um, Washington actually did a decent job running the football last year with the running backs.
Yeah.
People didn't realize how good they were at that. I think this system and this setup is going to be more run centric for this quarterback, and I'm interested to see what kind of plays they could draw up for this guy to make him comfortable. Because if you're like I said, if you're sitting back waiting on him to be Michael Penix, I think they're two different players. What are your thoughts on all that? What do you think about the quarterback room? Ty Simpson, for all intents and purposes, is the backup right now. But I just be honest with you, I could totally 100% see that changing by the start of the season or within the season, because Austin Mack just seems like he's tailor made for this DeBoer system, in my opinion. That's DeBoer's
Hmm.
guy. It makes sense to me, and I'm not seeing a lot of progression with Ty Simpson either. By the way, I went back and watched the spring game. I'm just not seeing it. I'm not seeing the progression. So, what do you think about this quarterback room? Um, Jalen Milroe was fifth in Heisman voting last year. Pretty good stuff. Can he hold on and improve and get back to that Heisman ceremony this year, Mason?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's on a short list of Heisman favorites and should be. With this new offense coming, he's going to be a feature of the offense. They're going to work on his mechanics, like you said. And I think he's going to be a much better passer this year. And I doubt that he's lost his ability to run the football. Right? Nobody that doesn't go away without injury or something. Right? So. And you see on your screen 12 touchdowns on the ground, 531 yards rushing. That's a weapon. I could see him growing in that as well, and learning to be a little bit more decisive and knowing when to tuck the ball and run, not taking a sack, trying to look 30 yards downfield for a deep ball. That was a little bit of the difference there last year. I think we're going to get a really good Jalen Milroe. As far as the quarterback room goes, Austin Mack is kind of the backup eventually, and I think Ty Simpson is getting squeezed here a little bit, but maybe he's progressed too. I haven't. We've seen the Ty Simpson experiment so far, and it hasn't worked out. He's. I mean, I commend the young man for sticking through it and staying at Alabama for this long. Maybe it'll work out for him. Maybe it'll all pan out. Who knows? But as of right now, Jalen Milroe's your guy. Really love his deep ball. 52.2% completed, 20 plus yards downfield. That's about as high as I've seen in doing these breakdowns. That's elite, for a deep ball. And so can he grow in the intermediate passes? That's really my only question. Short to intermediate throws. Can he be a little bit more decisive? Can he understand the new system that he has coming in better and be more effective than he was last year with a system that he learned for 2 years? So that's kind of the question for me going into this season. It's a new system, new offense. How quickly can he pick it up, and how decisive can he be at the quarterback position? Because all the talent's there. Nobody doubts this guy's talent as a runner or a passer. It's just putting it together and making the right decisions on the field. I think he's going to be much better this year and probably be on the Heisman podium. Top three for the Heisman by the end of the year.
I was never a huge fan of Tommy Rees, Mason. I just have to be honest. I was never a big fan of this guy's offensive play calling. I felt like it. I said it earlier, fitting a square peg in a round hole. That's what I felt like at times with this offense last year. Like I'm trying to do all this pro style stuff with this running quarterback last year. He wasn't a polished enough passer to do all that stuff. I feel like this team, offensive play calling wise, has upgraded this year versus last year. Now, we're going to talk about defense, and maybe it's the opposite of that. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, but offensively, play calling wise, I like who's calling the plays this year much better than I like who was calling them last year. Um, let's go over to the running back room. Mason, this is a room that I really, really like. And maybe I feel like people aren't talking about this running back room enough. I really don't. And part
Yeah.
of the reason I feel that way is because I think the offensive line is going to be really good. And it's specifically run blocking. I think they're gonna be really, really good, and I think it's really gonna clear the way for these guys. Justice Haynes looks like he's back to, you know, he's back in the shape that he needs to be in. We all know the trials and tribulations he's been through in his young career. He looks good. He looked good in the spring game. He looks healthy. Um, Jam Miller is he has got some tremendous upside. This guy is lightning quick. I watch these spring games a lot of times on 1.25x time. I speed them up. Hard to watch Jam Miller and really gather anything from it when you're at 1.25x. This guy, he looks, I mean, he's just all the way across the screen real quick. Justice Haynes, Jam Miller, I feel like they've really got an explosive nature to those guys. And Richard Young, I feel like, is a guy that is kind of being overshadowed, not thought about a whole lot. He was a redshirt freshman. He was a 4-star from the 23 class. Um, he was 5'11", 200 pounds. If he's 5'11", 200 pounds now, then I'm 215 because
Right.
I just saw him in the spring game. There's 0% chance this guy's 200 pounds at this point. Um, he's beefed up. He looks good. Really good accent to this this running back room. All these guys are the two guys on your left anyway. 6.7 yards per carry for Justice Haynes last year. 5 yards per carry for Jam Miller. Not a huge sample size, but I really like these running backs here. And then, by the way, incoming freshman Daniel Hill, Kevin Riley, both of those guys 4 stars. We've talked about it time and time again here on the First and Long College Football Show. Freshmen can compete and can provide depth in a running back room for sure. There's no doubt about it. It's one of those positions where it's not like offensive tackle where a true freshman is just going to come in and more than likely just get beat, right? I think a running back can handle it at a younger age. Um, what do you think about this running back room? I feel like they're in good shape to run the hell out of the football this year. That was the plan last year. I thought that was the plan last year for the whole year.
Yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
it was. Remember murder ball. Remember
Yeah.
we're not allowed to say murders on YouTube actually. So muck duck ball. That's what they were supposed to be running, and I think they're going to continue that this year. If this coaching staff is smart, I think that's what they're going for this year with this roster. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you mentioned Richard Young being much bigger. I mean, guy's so big he doesn't even fit inside the frame. Like this guy's he's massive. No, I mean I joke, but I do really like him as a prospect, and I think that he could see the field a pretty good bit this year, and kind of be that next Justice Haynes, and the running back waiting in the wing, which Alabama always has. There's always a 5-star sitting somewhere, waiting and patiently waiting to get their turn. Justice Haynes was absolutely lights out last year, and people didn't pick up on it because he only carried the ball 25 times. But as a true freshman, this guy came in college ready last year. I mean, you see 6.7 yards per carry. There's not much more that you can ask for. It ran very elusively. 3.8 yards after contact last year is really impressive. That's breaking some tackles right there. And then Jam Miller is proven. I think he's your proven running back that is going to be able to get you a score a game or so, and be very effective. And But behind them, you got two freshmen who are highly touted. It's the Alabama way, and that's pretty much what it's going to be. You'll probably see one of those guys redshirt more than likely, and then the other one will get in every now and then when needed. Hopefully, these guys stay healthy this year. I think. Everybody always hopes for that, but this is a really talented group. This is one of the best in the country. We'll get to the offensive line here in a minute, but I think that the offensive line is set up for run protection, and it should play in these running backs' favors more than likely.
Jump over to the wide receiver room, and this is the room that I feel like there is. No, it's not. I don't feel like it. I know this is the room that has the most questions on this offense. Um, Look, I really like a piece that you bring over from Washington, right? This is one of the best things about getting a new head coach in today's era. You have an onslaught of players that follow them, and so it really it's an automatic boost anywhere you go. You get 3 or 4 of your best players to come with you. Um, Jeremy Bernard, I wouldn't consider him one of the best players on that team last year, but I think he was just overshadowed a lot,
Yeah.
because I mean, think of the talent that was at wide receiver. There was 3 bona fide NFL dudes in front of him, um, and some of which were first round talents. So I don't really hold that against him, but he was still able to, um, he was still able to bring in 34 receptions, 402 yards, 2 touchdowns last year in an offense where you had Roma Dunze and stuff. I mean, it's pretty good stuff. Jeremy Bernard was all over the place during the spring game. It seemed to me that he had a clear advantage as far as knowing the scheme, knowing the play calls, knowing the terminology. I mean, he was just killing it. I mean, he was just absolutely killing it in the spring game. So I really like Jeremy Bernard. I like the upside on him. Kobe Prentice, uh, you like the prospect of the guy, but I think he's more of a complimentary dude. Kendrick Law kind of feel the same way. We have such a small sample size; it's hard to really know at this point. Um, Cole Adams, Mason, is a guy that looked really good in the spring. Does that translate to the regular season? He's not a huge guy. He's not a real big guy. He seemed a little undersized, and I don't know. He just didn't look like your everyday SEC starting wide receiver to me at this point. Um, but he was out there snagging catches. He's a reception receiver, and he was, or excuse me, a possession receiver, and he was doing exactly that. So I think Cole Adams is a guy that's going to get some playing time. Um, but look, all eyes are kind of on this freshman that's coming in, Ryan Williams. Can he be the number one guy? Because right now I don't see a number one guy. I see a bunch of 2A guy. I see Jeremy Bernard, Kobe Prentice, 2As, 2A, 2B type players, right? Or maybe even a 1B. But I don't see any of these guys in this room stepping up and being that dude unless Ryan Williams can come in and do it as a true freshman. And that is asking a lot. I know he's really, really good, but that is asking a lot. The hype train is real with this one. What do you think about this wide receiver room, Mason? It's a little overwhelming, or excuse me, it's a little underwhelming to me at this point.
It's overwhelming how underwhelming it is. Like, I don't know how to take it because we haven't seen it in an Alabama group in some
Yeah,
time. You
yeah.
know, um, I think things will change eventually. There's no way that Kalen Deboer is not going to be able to recruit wide receivers to this school. Um, but really, you would have to go back to some of those past classes that we kind of led the show off with in the recruiting, and you would look at the receivers in those classes and how many misses there were, how many people left because of any sort of disciplinary reason or whatever, couldn't see the field because of different reasons, right? A couple of them transfer out. Amari Nyblack and Isaiah Bond are now at Texas, right? Gosh, what was the receiver that transferred from Georgia?
Jermaine Burton's
Jermaine
gone.
Burton. No,
Yep.
no Jermaine Burton coming into this class. Maybe Jeremy Bernard is that guy. Maybe he's better than Jermaine Burton because I don't know. Maybe Alabama fans feel different. I was a little underwhelmed with him, so maybe Alabama fans feel like he played a little bit better. But
He can throw a
um,
pretty
I,
nasty punch. I saw him throw a pretty nasty punch in Tennessee.
yeah,
I
he can push a
kid. I
girl down
kid.
pretty hard. But no, I think this unit is very unproven. Look, we don't know what's going to happen. Maybe they're better than they were last year. That's very doable. This wasn't an extremely productive unit last year, so maybe with this system and with this offensive scheme, that maybe they're going to be able to scheme these guys open. Who knows? But on paper, as of today in early August, I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing this as being an elite SEC group, which has been the standard, right? Anxious to see Ryan Williams. My concern with Ryan Williams is that he reclassed from 2024 to
Mhm.
2020, or from 25 to 24. Still was the number 8 overall recruit, so still very highly touted guy. But is this guy going to be ready to be the guy right away? Maybe we'll see.
Yep.
He's kind of undersized as well. He kind of fits that Devonte Smith role. As of right now, he could be gaining some weight, and we'd love to see it. But as of right now, he's pretty undersized to be thrown out to the SEC schedule that they're going to be that
Well,
they're
he,
going to
he
have.
barely has a driver's license.
That's right. The guy was 16. I mean, coming out. So it's pretty impressive, honestly. And hey, man, if he does hit, I'll be cheering for him because it's kind of cool, to be out there
Yeah.
and be the guy at Alabama, at 17 years old. Um, and then another guy just from down the road here in Georgia, Caleb Odom. This is Juju Lewis's favorite target, or was until he graduated and went to college. But Caleb Odom, 6'5", 215-pound, was a tight end, but I think that he just never really put the size on to play at 6'5", with that 6'5" frame. Really needed to be about 230, 235, but stuck around 215. They converted him over to wide receiver. Going to be interesting to see kind of what he does. I'm not sure from a speed perspective if he's able to kind of hold up and be that true X receiver. But he's got the size. 6'5" is great, and a true 6'5" at that. Top 100 overall player. I think that we could see a little bit of him as well. But a lot of young talent, and a transfer that's pretty unproven in Jeremy Bernard. We'll have to see what happens here. And you've also got Emmanuel Henderson, who was a former 5-star running back that converted to receiver. He's kind of playing that slot role. Maybe we see him get a little bit more active, but he's kind of not really materialized into his 5-star status as of yet. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, there's certainly talent in this room, but it's all unproven. Just pretty much all of it, right? I mean, I don't think that's um, earth shattering news, right? This is all new, and there's just not very much proof in this, and there's nothing we can really take from that other than wonder what's going to happen in week 1, right?
As far as all the Alabama's in the top 10 in pretty much any preseason ranking you're going to look at. There's more questions about this team than any other team in the top 10, in my opinion. As far as
Yeah.
just schematically, I mean, there's just tons of mystery surrounding this program right now. Um, it's going to be super interesting to see how it unravels. I will be watching every single game. I can't wait to see what happens. Look, you were talking about Caleb Odom. I included him at the bottom of this slide. I did not realize that he was transitioning over to wide receiver. So we have him on the tight end slide here. But with that being said, you've got 3 other dudes here. CJ Dupree, 11 receptions, 183 yards. You do the math at home. That's a pretty doggone good average, yards per catch there. But there's just not a lot of experience here. I think you got different guys that can do different things. I think CJ Dupree is a pretty good one, right? Um, the other 2 are just unproven to me. I don't know. Danny Lewis Jr. I mean, that's a jag. Danny Lewis Jr. is a Jag. He's a 3-star from 2022, and he hasn't played. So
Yeah.
there's nothing I can gather from him other than the fact that he's 6'5", 255. So that's what I put down on the stats right there. Um, like I said, I like CJ Dupree. I'm just there's not much else here, and it is what it is. There's not a ton of big time pass catchers at Alabama this year, and it is weird. It's weird. I feel weird saying it. What do you think?
Yeah. I think that one, and I don't know a ton about this guy either, but Josh Cuevas comes over from Washington, another one of those that followed Kalen DeBoer over. At 6'5", 250 pounds, maybe a blocking tight end. And I think that CJ Dupree is going to have to kind of be that pass catching tight end and play it that way. I don't know that Kalen DeBoer is really going to be featured in a tight end very much, though.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true.
we haven't seen a ton of it in the past. I mean, I don't know about going back to his Indiana days or anything like that, but it seems like to me, and if he were, he probably would have kept Caleb Odom in the tight end room and tried to bulk him up for at least a year, let him redshirt or something. Instead, he says, "Hey, I could probably use you better at wide receiver." I think that's kind of a tell as to his offensive play scheme. You might need one guy to catch a pass there every now and then, but Dupree, he may go from 183 yards to 300 yards with 5 touchdowns or something like that, right? With an offense that's just not utilizing the tight end like some of the others that we've seen in college football today. So, yeah, not a whole lot to glean from this unit, unfortunately.
Let's talk about the offensive line. I think we can gather a lot from what we know about this group. You bring in Parker Brailsford. As I said, there's always a ripple effect that follows these coaches of players and coaches from wherever they came from, and Parker Brailsford is one of those guys. Um, Look, I'm not saying I like Parker Brailsford. I think he's going to be an upgrade at center from what you dealt with last year. I don't have to go into the snapping issues that happened last year. Um, I know that rattled a lot of people's cage, but it is very important. The quarterback and the center are the only two that touch the ball every play, and um, Parker Brailsford has shown an inept ability to be able to get the quarterback the football, no matter if you're under center or shotgun or whatever. So I feel good about that. Now, is he, some kind of world beater? I don't necessarily know about that either. We'll see how he does in the SEC. He comes from the Pac-12, last year. Rest in peace. But there's just not a ton of big defensive linemen in the Pac-12, guys. I mean, it is what it is. There's not a bunch of great, or there wasn't a bunch of great defensive linemen in that group. But you get Caden Proctor coming back. He's going to play left tackle. He leaves and comes back without ever playing anywhere else. Really, that was interesting. But 6'7", 360 pounds. He cut his teeth last year. There was some really bad moments. There was some really good moments. More good than bad towards the end of the year. Um, but for all intents and purposes, Mason, um, the interior of this offensive line is in good shape, I think. I don't think we have a ton to worry about from left guard to right guard. I think those three guys in the middle there are in pretty good shape. Is Caden Proctor going to improve? There's one. He was improving as the year went on last year, so I have no reason to believe that he won't. Um, and Elijah Pritchett is in he's in a battle for that right tackle spot. I wouldn't say that this job is his to lose or anything like that. It's up for grabs this fall between Elijah Pritchett, Miles McVay, Neckel Bertrand. Um, we'll see. We'll see how that pans out on that right side. But if you got five guys here, you don't know one spot. You got a competition at one spot, and then all those other guys are going to be dispersed and be nice depth after, you figure out who the starter is. I think you're in good shape. As I said before, when we talked about the running back room, I like this offensive line room. There's dudes in here. I know there's dudes in here, dudes on top of dudes. You bring in some more depth as well. We talked about Bertrand. He came over from Texas A&M. Not a crazy, highly touted guy coming out of high school or anything, but a big body and somebody that Alabama wanted. Geno Vandermark, He was a left guard. He transfers from Michigan State. He's a former 3-star as well, so he'll provide some depth. I don't think he's trying to start or anything on the interior of this offensive line, but he is a body that's going to be there that has experience to back some people up. I like the interior of this offensive line. I think they're going to be really good at running the football. I noticed in the spring game, anytime there was a pulling guard, they were flying. Right, they were flying around. They were getting to the linebackers. I was pretty impressed with everything that I was seeing. I know not all of these guys played every down, but I think this is a good group, and I think this is kind of the hallmark for this team. You got to have this offensive line be dominant, otherwise, um, you know, might be struggling on offense. What do you
Yeah.
think about this offensive line here?
Yeah, look, I really like this unit when it comes to running the football. You got a bunch of road graders up here that are going to pave the way for these running backs, pave the way for Jalen Milrow, but they had their issues in pass protection last year, and it showed just in the number of sacks, um, but also in kind of some other statistics as well. You do bring in a new center, and everyone else is pretty much the same, right? Right tackle, I guess, is new there
Right,
with Elijah
correct,
Pritchard, right?
correct.
So to me, look, and Caden Proctor was a problem last year, early in the year. Gave up 12 sacks, had 23 quarterback hurries given up, but he started every game. They kind of stuck with him. Great in the run game, right? Didn't have any issues there with that size. I think he's going to be much better this year. I think he's maybe a future All SEC left tackle. I don't know if he'll do it this year, but maybe by his junior year he'll be ready. I have full confidence that he's going to be playing really well, but we got to see it first. Um, didn't see it for a full season last year, so it's tough to say. But he was a true
Yeah,
freshman. Um, Tyler Booker might be the best guard in the game, best interior lineman in the game potentially. He's really solid. Did give up 2 sacks last year, which isn't bad, but not playing like a first rounder with 2 sacks and 11 quarterback hurries. But really solid in the run game. Definitely future NFL guy. Nothing to pick at too much there. The center, Brailsford, coming over from Washington, he's actually 6'2", 275, and so a little undersized for an SEC lineman. Um,
I screw this crap up every single day, man. I do this every day, and I can't get it right.
it's all good. I
Damn it.
went back and checked a few different sites, and
I
everything
knew
says
that. I knew
6'2",
that
275. Yeah,
when I looked
yeah,
because I looked it all up. Damn it. Carry on. Carry on.
all good, all good.
Hey, Trevor, edit that out.
Yeah,
We're good.
yeah. There you go. Hey, we catch it before the commenters do, which they do. They will catch it for sure.
They will catch
Um,
it.
yeah. Um, but anyways, I don't know much about Brailsford as far as his mechanics go, but I think he's a little bit undersized for an SEC lineman. You do have the backup in Vandermark, like you mentioned, who does bring the size at 6'5", 320. It would be interesting to see him at center at 6'5", but I mean, of course, it happens every day. But anyways, Jaden Roberts, another really solid interior offensive lineman, one of the best players, period, on this team. Gave up 3 sacks and only 6 quarterback hurries last year, which the 6 is really good. The fact that 3 of them got home and got to the quarterback is not so good. But ultimately, I mean, 6 quarterback hurries is really efficient. That was the best on the offensive line last year, but he only started 9 games. So he's a true road grader, though. Another one that is really gonna just lay the lumber all the way through to the second level of the defense and open up some holes for this running back group. But I think it's a really solid group. I think they're going to be pushing for the Joe Moore Award, and if not, if they are struggling again in pass protection, I think that we're going to be questioning this offense for the rest of the season and wondering what its ceiling really is.
Yeah. Let's carry on over to the defense, my friend. You bring in defensive coordinator Kane Womack, who was the head coach over at South Alabama last year. I like adding a head coach at a coordinator position. I feel like that's always a win for your team. You've got a guy that really understands the entire aspect of the game, right? He's been the CEO. He understands um, what the defense needs to do to help the offense, and vice versa. So I think that's a good thing. We'll see. We'll see. This guy, he came from South Alabama, so we don't know what he's going to do at this level. And he's got some serious work to do. Got some serious work to do, specifically in the secondary this year. But we can look at the stats from 2023, Mason. I just feel like there's we can't correlate a whole lot of that to 2024 with this team, because there's only 42% returning production, and um, where the linebacker room, a lot of that returns, and that's a lot of that 42% there. Um,
Hmm.
a guy here or there in the secondary. Let's get into the position groups. This was a good defense last year, guys, and we've come to know Alabama football and know that the defense is always going to be good or better, possibly great. And there's guys in the rooms to do great things. I don't know how great this defense is going to be. Let's kind of jump into it. Defensive line, you bring in a little bit of a new scheme, and for me to sit here and explain to you what each of these the Wolf linebacker, um, the Bandit, right, which is the nose guard, I think, or the D tackle. They have different names for all this stuff, but this is a 4-2-5, right? They were running here. It's just kind of a different terminology for certain positions, and at LT Overton spot, you're kind of, which I believe might be the Wolf spot. No, I believe that's Quindarius Robinson.
That's
You're
the
looking
the bandit. Yeah,
the bandit,
bandit.
the bandit.
Yeah.
Okay, and so each one kind of has like a different combination of, are you a linebacker? Are you a defensive line? Are you a mold of the two? Blah blah blah. So for me to sit here and explain to you all that, I mean, I'm not going to do that. You can go read about the swarm defense, the 4-2-5 swarm, all you want to. But here's how it's looking for me. You get LT Overton in at defensive end, obviously a net win, but he's a former 5-star. He's got all the upside. Can he harness it at Alabama? Are the coaches on hand to help him harness it? Well, we're going to have to see. Tim Keenan, Jaheim Otis, those are your couple of guys on the inside there. You got Tim Smith, that's a returning guy. He's going to help at defensive tackle. You got Jamarian Latham. He'll help at the defensive end spot with Quindarius Robinson and LT Overton there at those two end spots. Um, so there's not like a guy on this defensive line that's just like a huge star necessarily, but there's some pretty daggone good players and a lot of upside that might just be unrealized at this point. Um, this is going to be a good defensive line. It's not going to be a bad defensive line. Um, I really like Jaheim Otis. I like the upside of that guy. Um, he's not listed as a starter on the depth chart that I looked at. I went ahead and threw him on there. Jaheim Otis has got to start. Come on. There's no
Yeah.
way you're keeping this guy off the field. He's got to start. He's really good in the center of these defenses, and I think he's going to fit in well there at that D tackle spot. You got a couple of freshmen coming in. I don't know how much they'll play. We'll just kind of have to see. What do you think about this defensive line group?
Yeah, I think it's shaping up to be really solid, and somebody's gonna show up on this defensive line and play themselves into a first round. It might be Jaheim Otis. The depth chart I looked at does have him listed as a starter. So and it's also got Jamarian Latham listed as a starter over LT Overton. Look, there's a competition going on there, and that's what people need to
Yeah.
realize. There's competition going on at every position at Alabama, but probably one a little bit closer and one you want to pay attention to at that bandit position at the defensive end slot. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, LT Overton was a guy who was highly recruited. Another guy, kind of like Ryan Williams, who came out a year early. You can see that he was the number one overall recruit coming out of high school, but that was with the and I get the years mixed up, but that was with the class that he was initially supposed to go out with, and he reclassified and was still able to maintain his 5-star status, but anyways, kind of came in as a younger guy. So you see that he's a junior. Well, he could have very easily had been, or he could very easily be a true sophomore this year in his second year, as he skipped his last year of high school. So the reason I say that is to say the fact that he didn't start at Texas A&M, it doesn't mean that he's not going to be a good player. It doesn't mean he's not going to be a future NFL guy. He's a little bit younger. So coming over to Alabama, he might actually realize his potential. He may be due for a couple of good years in Tuscaloosa. We'll have to wait and see there. But Tim Keenan is a guy who kind of flies under the radar. I think to me he's the glue to this defensive front. 38 tackles is really good for a nose tackle. 1.5 tackles for a loss, 1 sack, had 15 quarterback hurries and 16 run stops. So for a nose tackle to have 15 quarterback hurries, that's getting it done. And then obviously with 16 run stops up the middle, when you're probably taking on double team up front, that's pretty that shows the versatility when you're able to do both. You're twitchy up front as a nose guard, to get to the passer, create some havoc, and then also stop the Russian attack. So really excited to see him for another year, and I think Jaheim Otis is a star in the making, and I think he's going to have another really good year. Anxious to see what they do coming off the edge as well. With Quindarius Robinson and Latham or Overton, whoever it is, I think that they're going to have to find a way to get some stats and get some more sacks from this unit, because I think that's been lacking for really just last year. But I think that they're going to want to get back into their true form as Alabama defensive linemen.
Jaheim Otis is just, you have to be really good at football with that name. I mean, you just got to be. Your mama and daddy just got to know that you're going to be a badass to name you Jaheim Otis. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good football name in my opinion. Let's talk about the linebackers, Mason. This is probably the group that I think there's the least amount of questions about. Deontay Lawson, Jaheed Campbell. You got Jeremiah Alexander and Justin Jefferson to back those guys up. You got 2 spots to fill. You got 4 dudes. You got 2 dudes that are starting that are really, really good. 66 tackles for Campbell, 67 tackles for Deontay Lawson. As I said, that's a lot of your 42% returning production. Is a lot of that is these 2 guys right here. Both of them had several tackles for loss, 3 sacks for Lawson last year. I don't have any questions about linebacker. Deontay Lawson, Jihad Campbell. I think they're going to be able to serve all the needs of this defense, and if they can't do it, you got a couple of guys coming behind them that I certainly feel like can. What do you think about the linebacker room? I don't have any questions here.
No, I mean, this is the most solid group on the defense. Might be the best 1-2 middle linebacking group in college football. This is a really good couple of guys here. Deontay Lawson is kind of the leader of this bunch. 67 tackles last year, was second on the team, behind a guy named Caleb Downs who got 107 last year, which was just crazy for a true freshman. But he's no longer with the program. So anyway, second on the team, highest returning production, I guess you could say, from a tackling perspective. 5.5 tackles for a loss, 3 sacks, 35 run stops, which was first on the team. That's a really, really good number. Anything over 20 is good, and he was at 35. Average depth of tackle was 2.3 yards. So he's really just playing the run really well, but also had 14 quarterback hurries and had an 18.5% pass rush win rate. Folks, if y'all have been watching any of our previews, you know that above 10% is kind of what you want to shoot for. He was at 18.5%, which is pretty elite for a linebacker. And then Jihad Campbell, 66 tackles, just a little bit less, was third on the team, 4 tackles for a loss, 1 interception, 8.5% missed tackle rate, so really efficient when it comes to tackling. 18 run stops for him and 11 quarterback hurries. So another versatile piece that can play the run, play the pass really well. These guys fly around the football. And behind them, you got Justin Jefferson, who was a former Georgia linebacker and has had just a ton of experience. I mean, he's got to be in his fifth year, I guess, at this point. But yeah, you've got an experienced guy who can come in there and give them a breather with very little drop off, and another five-star freshman coming in, and Zabian. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong line there. Jeremiah Alexander, like you've got listed, is your number 4 guy, I think, in this linebacking group, and third year player here. So you got some experience behind the experienced linebackers, but a really solid unit overall.
Yep. Yep. Very solid. Very, 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 very solid. I like it a lot. Now that we've got a solid group out of the way, let's talk about this group that's dealt with some serious attrition, Mason. Um, it's been tough going for this secondary ever since last year ended, right? Um, just tons of guys out the door. Felt like the coaching staff did the best they probably could, right? In the transfer portal, you bring over Deshaun Jones from Wake Forest to play one of the cornerback spots. You bring in Damani Jackson from USC to play the other corner spot there. Um, you got a guy like Devonta Smith that I'm calling him a nickelback. What did they call him, Mason? Do you remember what
Husky.
they called him? A husky. Right. That makes sense actually to me. That name makes sense. Like a husky secondary player, that makes sense, right? Kind of like a linebacker. Uh, some of these didn't. I couldn't understand the correlation there. That one made sense to me. You bring in Keon Sabb. He comes over from Michigan. He played in every single game for Michigan last year. So you do bring in some good experience there, a good player. And then you bring back Malachi Moore, which is between him and the 2 linebackers that are coming back. That's probably all of the production from last year, just about, other than a couple of guys on the defensive line, obviously. But Malachi Moore is really good. I don't have any concerns about him, but the rest of these guys are just a little bit unknown. A guy like Deshaun Jones, how does he respond coming from a place like Wake Forest, who was a terrible team last year, um, in a conference that you can go undefeated in and win the conference championship and still not even go to the college football playoff? So, what do we know? What do we know about Deshaun Jones? What we know is on the screen there. I think he's a decent pickup. We'll have to see how it translates into the SEC. Devonta Smith just doesn't have a lot of experience. That's kind of what he's lacking there. So, yes, there are some good pieces that Alabama has went and got, but I still feel like this room is lacking, and a team that is a prolific passing team or has prolific wide receivers is probably going to be trying to pick on the secondary. That's probably going to be part of the game plan. What do you think, Mason? What do you think about the secondary room? And then we'll get into the schedule and give all you guys our predictions.
Yeah, a lot of questions here. Just mentioned that Caleb Downs left the program, went over to Ohio State. That was a huge loss. He would have been a great center fielder for this young group to kind of lean on, and a super productive guy. But for Keon Sabb to come in, I think that was a really big addition. He wasn't a starter for Michigan in his first 2 years, but had a pretty good amount of production. 360 snaps last year, 5 pass breakups and 2 interceptions from those 360 snaps. Former 5-star guy, a guy that Alabama recruited heavily, and it was kind of down between Alabama and Michigan in that recruitment, and that's why you never stop recruiting, y'all, because you never know when that player may end up on your team again, down the road as a transfer or whatever. But anxious to see him. I think he's going to be solid. He's not Caleb Downs, but I think he's going to be really good, strong safety for this team. Malachi Moore, I think, kind of shores up the middle of the defensive backfield. He's got 2,334 career snaps, so a lot of experience there. And I think this is his 5th year starting, if I'm not mistaken. So really a lot of production there, and somebody that this defense can lean on, this secondary group in particular. Damani Jackson coming over from USC, a former 5-star guy, but just hasn't really lived up to it. So we're gonna have to wait and see on him. I think that he's got some more fuel in the tank there, and probably got underutilized over at USC in some really just poor defenses that were going on over there on the West Coast. And then Deshaun Jones coming in. Look, I kind of feel like Deshaun Jones is a safety play, or like a safety net, I guess, for one of these two freshmen, these 5-star freshmen who came in, and Xavier Mincy and Xavier Brown, to come in and fill that role eventually. These two guys are elite. I, who knows whether or not they're actually going to end up, taking over a cornerback slot, which is really tough to play as a true freshman. That's not a position you want to put a true freshman for sure, but you got to think that one of these two are going to hit, and you're going to be able to play them right away and feel pretty good about it. And there's a chance, that Damani Jackson ends up losing his position by the end of the year as well. You've got some talent behind these guys, is my point, that I think you would have been doing them a disservice to throw them into the fire and make them start right away. But you bring in these transfer players who have some experience as that sort of safety net, and then allow these true freshmen to potentially play themselves onto the roster. But that's gonna depend on what they do at practice. That's you certainly don't you want them to compete for those slots. I'm not saying that you create this defined succession plan, but I think you've got a great couple of transfers in here to allow these freshmen to get up to speed and eventually take their slot potentially. Let's hope, at least. And then the other freshman that I'm watching is Jalen Mbakwe, who plays a safety position, but another 5-star guy. So 3 5-stars coming into this class. It was one of the best DB overhauls for a recruiting class that I've ever seen. You also had Red Morgan coming in, and Dre Kirkpatrick. So a lot of talent coming in, younger talent coming in through this transfer portal, or excuse me, through the recruiting class, the high school recruiting class. And I think that one or two of these guys we're going to see a lot of this year. We'll have to wait and see what comes out of fall camp and what sort of whispers we're hearing. But I'd be pretty surprised if one of these guys isn't starting by midseason.
Interesting. Let's jump into the schedule, my friend. Different looking schedule, guys. We don't have divisions anymore, so got the new teams coming into the SEC, as everybody has been beat over the head with that topic over the last little bit. And get ready, because it's about to get ramped up. Start off with Western Kentucky, South Florida, and then you go on the road to Wisconsin. So you got 2 easy dubs there to start the year, although the South Florida game last year was an absolute catastrophe. I can't see that being repeated. Um, Alabama won the game, but it was just a disgusting. It was just disgusting. I was with some Alabama fans that day at a wedding, and they were just like, "Please turn that off." Um, it ended up not being a big deal at all, right? So, 2 easy wins to start the year. Wisconsin on the road. What can Tyler Van Dyke do? That's what that game's going to boil down to. Can Tyler Van Dyke stay upright, and can he hit his receivers downfield? I think there's going to be an opportunity for wide receivers to get open for Wisconsin. I don't think this is going to be a secondary that's going to be all the way ironed out at this point, 3 weeks into the season, right? September 14th. We'll see. It's going to be up to Mr. Van Dimes himself. Then you get a bye week, and then you got Georgia coming to town. That's going to be a huge, huge game. We all know what that game means for each of these programs. With the 12-team playoff, whatever team loses isn't out of it by any means or anything like that. Especially if it's a really good game. I mean, that both of these teams are likely to be, in that top 15 to top 10, maybe top 5 or top 3 even. So a loss from one of these squads to one another isn't going to kill any hopes or anything, but I think that Georgia game's a loss. I feel like Georgia is way better equipped to deal with this Alabama team this year. I feel that way. The wide receivers seem like they're going to be able to do their thing with the secondary. Still pretty early in the year, right? Though it is after a bye week, maybe you figure out a few things. Um, we'll see. We'll see. I think Georgia is going to be able to handle Alabama this year, but it is going to be in Bryant Denny Stadium, which is extremely hard to win in. I think that's going to be a real close game there. Um, at Vandy, everybody's favorite road game. South Carolina at their place, right? Or excuse me, South Carolina at home. Tennessee at their place. I think that's a loss as well. Um, then you got Mizzou bye week at LSU, Mercer at Oklahoma, and Auburn. I think all those games are wins, right? I think Mizzou is the wrong type of style to be able to match up with this Alabama team. We'll see. They do have some really good wide receivers, so any team that I see on this list right now, Mason, that has really good wide receivers, I know LSU does, I know Tennessee does, I know Missouri has really good wide receivers. Um, Auburn's got a wide receiver that's young, and we just don't know what he's going to be like by this point in the season, right? He's not going to be a freshman in the last game of the year anymore. He's pretty much a sophomore at that point. So we'll see what kind of steam he can gather as the year goes on. Um, the rest
Oklahoma.
of these Oklahoma has got some pretty good wide receivers. Deion Burke
Hmm.
specifically, I can think of. Georgia's got good wide receivers. It's a tough year to not have a good secondary. It's a tough year to not have a good secondary. Vegas has got this team set at 9.5. I'm thinking 9 wins is what this team ends up with. I feel like a loss to Georgia, a loss to Tennessee, and then one more somewhere in there, either Oklahoma or Missouri or LSU, one of those 3. Um, I think Alabama can figure out the Wisconsin thing early in the year, maybe just by pure overwhelming that team with talent, right? Alabama's just going to be so much more talented than Wisconsin is. Um, but yeah, that's kinda how I feel about it, man. I think 9-3 is the record prediction for this year for me. So if I was to go over under, I would pick under. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Um, I tend to agree with you. I think going into this breakdown, before we really started breaking this team down and looking at the schedule, and then also we've already previewed every other team on this schedule. Well, all the major teams, I guess,
All the
on the
big boys.
schedule. Yeah, all the ones that would be testing Alabama. We did Wisconsin, we did Tennessee, LSU, Oklahoma, and Auburn. We're going to do Georgia here in a few days, about a week
Go
from
check them
today, I
out,
guess.
guys. Go check them all out.
Yeah, yeah. If you want to do some homework on some of your team's opponents, then I definitely welcome you to check those out. But knowing what I know about all of those main programs, I think Tennessee's a loss for Alabama this year. I feel like if you can't take advantage of Tennessee's secondary, you're not going to beat them. That's kind of
It's a good point.
their one weakness on defense. And then also Nico Iamaleava's probably in a better position, I would say, with given the skill around him than where Jalen Milroe is as a passer. And then also, I don't have any doubt in their run game. Also, a really good offensive line. I think that Tennessee is everything that Alabama is with better wide receivers right this year. At least the starters. They don't have the depth that Alabama has, but I'm projecting that the starters are going to be healthy at that point. And I think that Tennessee it's going to be a tough game, especially with that game being played in Knoxville. I don't see Alabama winning that one. I think Missouri could sneak up and get you. You mentioned good wide receivers. Missouri's got good wide receivers, and Brady Cook is a veteran at this point.
Yep.
Um, watch out for that game, especially coming off of a loss at Tennessee. You get to come home, and now you got to face Mizzou. That's a tough little 2 game stretch right there. Um, LSU, I don't think is going to hold up, especially coming off of a bye. I just don't. I don't think that they have the dudes to win that game. Especially, I mean, it is at LSU in
Their
Baton
defense
Rouge,
is just
but
so bad. It's gotta get a lot better.
I don't see it getting that much better right away, but we'll see. We'll see. Baker could have those guys ready to roll, ready to play. We saw Ohio State do it with Jim Knowles in the first season. They were much better, much improved. we'll have to wait and see. I just don't think that they have the horses in the stable to go out there and play at an elite SEC level. The only two games. So right now I've got a loss at Georgia, or a loss against Georgia, loss at Tennessee. It's 50-50 on Mizzou. I'm gonna say 50-50 that you lose one of either Oklahoma or Auburn. Um, the good news is you get Auburn at Bryant Denny, so that helps. Or excuse me, Saban Field now at Bryant Denny, um, so that does help. But I think that a rivalry game like this, I mean, anything could happen. Auburn is going to be seeking revenge after what happened last year, and I think that they're a much improved roster. The defense is going to be really good, and I think that they have gone out and got some players for Peyton Thorne to throw to this year, and it's going to be different. It's going to be a different team. Auburn's better this year. I think if you're operating under the mindset that Alabama is as good as they were last year, if not a little bit worse, then you'd have to think that Auburn's got a chance to come in and win that one. So for me, I'm on pace with you. I think you're going to lose to Georgia. I think you're going to lose to Tennessee. You're going to drop one of either Missouri, Oklahoma, or Auburn. If I had to put money on it, I'd say it's probably going to be Missouri. I think that that's a pretty good Missouri team. And at 9-3, when your best win is going to be probably Oklahoma or Auburn, I don't think you're getting into the playoffs coming out of the SEC with that record. There are some 9-3 teams that could do it with certain schedules, but I don't think if you're not beating Georgia or Tennessee with 3 losses, I think that Alabama's on the outside of the college football playoff looking in. Before doing this breakdown, I had Alabama picked as a playoff team, and now I'm kind of second guessing myself after doing the breakdown, knowing what I know about these teams. I think that Alabama is going to be just outside of that, but going to have a really good 2025 and a really strong case for a national championship in 2025.
Yeah, I think some of these matchups, I mean, yeah, I think you nailed it on some of these. I think these are just tough matchups for this Alabama team. I feel like there's a bit of an Achilles heel, for this team, and it certainly is the secondary, and I think you could say secondary on defense and wide receiver, on offense. And, Tennessee has that ability, man. Their front seven is dynamite this year, man. Their front seven is better than Alabama's this year, I think. It maybe not, maybe not,
I don't know,
but
man. That defensive line is stout and deep for
it's really
Tennessee.
good. It's
It's
really
going to be
good.
really good, y'all.
It's going to be hard to run the ball on them. And my point is, that's what this Alabama offense is going to be centered around. It's going to be centered around running the football, and it's the best front seven Tennessee's had in a while now. And like you said, their weakness is they don't have a secondary. Can this Alabama team take advantage of it with what we think are under an underwhelming pass catching room between tight ends and wide receivers? I don't see it. I think you absolutely nail it there. Um, we could go over the schedule for 2 hours here. We'd love to do it with you. If you would like to do more of this stuff with us, consider hitting the subscribe button. Come and hang out with us at the First and Long College Football Show. We're going to be doing this stuff all year long. We've got live shows before the weekends during the football season, giving you our predictions. We've got Between the Lines coming up, which is our college football betting show. We've got all of our reaction shows going to be coming after the crazy weekends that we're going to have throughout September, October, November, December, into January, right? We're going to have all kinds of playoff games this year with a 12-team playoff. Come and hang out with us at the First and Long College Football Show. We thank you so much for watching. Until we see you next time, I'm signing out. I'm Marcus. That's Mason. Everybody have a great day. See you next time.